This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW.
I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
My strength and my role in this weird world is to try and tell some stories about people doing good things in wine. Ultimately, I love what's in the bottle, but I'm probably even more interested in how it got there.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Nick Ryan is an extremely well-spoken and authoritative voice of the Australian wine industry. Writer, judge, presenter and communicator, Nick is a self-employed and self-effacing career journalist. He also happens to have some of the best bed hair in the business. Hi Nick, thanks for joining me.
Best intro ever.
And it's all the truth.
Yeah, you should see it this morning. It's particularly dishevelled. Lucky this is not a video podcast.
Not at all. I'd be thrilled to see it. You must make so many people jealous, because I know there's a lot of men out there that really just wish they had a little bit more on top, and you're just killing it at life, aren't you?
I wrote a newspaper column once about, I think I have more straight men talk about my hair than just about any other fellow on the planet. But, I have a lot of physical failings, but going bald's not going to be one of them.
I think it's pretty awesome, and you know what? If they're a little jealous, then best be it. Oh well.
Well, that's it. That's it. Well, the only thing is, it's just my head's too big to wear trucker caps, so I need to have the hair.
Well, you wear it well. Nick, tell me about. Do you have a first memory of wine, or the first time you were ever kind of aware of grapes crushed that go into a bottle?
Yeah, Look, I do, and it sounds utterly pretentious, but it's a lot more down to earth in reality. Look, my dad always liked wine. He was just a country town lawyer, but always had an interest in wine, and there was wine on the table, as a kid growing up, and we grew up in sort of country South Australia, sort of on the edge of the desert. But I still remember coming to the Clare Valley as a kid on sort of weekend, where Dad would drive around and fill up the boot with wine and fill up himself probably just as much. But the actual, and I say this story quite often, and every time I tell it I'm quite amazed, but the first wine I ever really remember tasting is Shadowy Chem, and only because my parents used to share a half bottle of it every year on their wedding anniversary. This is back in the 70s. It still was a pretty pricey bottle of wine then, but it wasn't what it is now. But that was just their how they would mark their wedding anniversary every year. And I think one year a babysitter bailed on them at the last minute, probably knowing what they were getting into. And so Mum and Dad ended up having dinner at home and not going out, but still opened that little half bottle. And I remember Dad saying, "Here, try this." And I remember thinking that is something quite spectacular. So, it's all been downhill since there, pretty much.
I can imagine, though, to a adolescent or a child's palate, though, just the magic of what that would have tasted like. It would have been right up your alley. That's certainly the wine to hook you at that age.
Well, yeah, it just blew the top of my head off, really. I mean, you used to, as a I must have been, I think 7 or 8. You used at that age to, sweetness, and that is what your palate responds to. But that was something on a whole nother level. So, and then I just sort of started, trying to smell what Dad had on the table at dinner and that sort of thing. And then, sort of always had a vague interest in it, and one day fell into it as a profession.
Actually, Julia Child and Paul Child, they used to drink a half bottle of Chem on all of their anniversaries too. So your parents were in very good company.
Well, they're very good company. My mother's a better cook than Julia Child.
I love that. That's such
I'll say that. I know. I know. Oh, yeah, no, she'll be the first person to listen to this when it comes out, so I thought I might as well get that in now.
Perfect. All the brownie points. I love it. Well, hi, Mum out there. Now, tell me a little bit about how you ruffled feathers at Adelaide University.
Well, by not really going. When I was at finished school, fell into university, had a very good time, but not much of it inside a lecture theatre. So as an indication of how fundamentally lazy I was, I ended up getting thrown out of an arts degree for actually just not going enough. So that is something quite spectacular to be able to achieve. But it's just the way it happens. So I remember getting this, a certified letter arrive in the mail. I was living in my sort of first share house at the time, and thinking, oh, what's this? And I went, that's a letter basically from the university saying, look, there are other people that would like to come here, and don't you think you're holding up a space for someone who might actually turn up? So how about you bugger off? And I went, okay, I will. And moved to Sydney.
Lecture theatres are pretty hard to sit through, though, aren't they? When you think about some of the hours and just that one person standing in front of a whiteboard, I mean, kill me now.
Well, look, I think I was probably looking for any excuse to not go. I would drive to university, and if I couldn't get a park within sort of 50 metres of the front gate, I'd go, it's too hard, and go home. So, I wasn't exactly the most motivated, 19, 20-year-old, I must admit. My interests were elsewhere. So
what did you do then? What was the next step after you thought uni's not for you? What to then?
Yeah, look, so I moved to Sydney. A couple of mates were doing it, and I went, you know what, I'm going to go and do that too. And it was actually, this is sort of where the wine thing happens, because we, all three of us, got a dodgy share house in Woolloomooloo, down at the bottom of Burke Street in Woolloomooloo. When even before the development of the wharves and things, when they were all still abandoned, and the kind of place where you would wake up one morning and there'd be a pair of hobo jocks set aflame on your front doorstep. That actually happened one morning. There was a pair of ignited hobo jocks burning on our front doorstep. Every cat in the inner eastern suburbs of Adelaide decided to come and crap in the little back courtyard behind our little terrace house. So I needed to get a job to pay the rent on that hovel, and I saw an ad in the Herald, back in those days when you read the classified ads in the paper looking for work, asking for someone to work at a place called Crundle Cellars up in Bryme Street, King's Cross. So I went up there, applied for the job, went in, sat down in Jeffrey Crundle's famous back office. I was actually only last week down in Tasmania, Joe Hollyman's place, plunging some Pinot ferments and things, and another old mate of ours, Matt Lowe, who was another wine rep. Joe was a rep for Negociants in those days, and Matt was a rep for Fesk and Company, having both done the wine marketing course at Roseworthy. And we became friends because I was hanging out in the shop, and they were sort of hanging around the shop waiting for. There used to be this succession of reps that would come in to see Jeffrey in his back office, all slightly shaking and pale, because they knew they were about to get a bollocking from grumpy old Jeffrey Crundle. But I went for the job interview. Part of the job interview was, he said, can you name 7 grape varieties? And I did. And he went, well, I've just spoken to 17 other blokes and they couldn't do that, so you've got the job. And I don't think that was it because I had a particular, interest in wine. I wasn't buying wine magazines or anything like that. I went for the job, A, to pay rent, B, because I thought I could get cheap beer. But, I think it was that growing up in Adelaide thing, that sort of wine gets into your skin through osmosis. You're surrounded by it in Adelaide, unlike any other city in the country, I think. And I went to a school in Adelaide run by Jesuit priests. So they've got the Seven Hill Winery in Clare. Our Year 8 excursion was to the Seven Hill Winery. So there's 90 boys. Yeah, the tour was a tour of the old cemetery, a tour of the old boarding house building, and then Brother John May took us through the winery, gave us all obviously a dry lesson on winemaking and then the science behind fermentation, and then we had to go to mass, and then we got a tour of the crypt underneath the church where all the old Jesuits are buried, including the one open slot that was there waiting for Brother John, and he pointed out and said, "Oh, that one's waiting for me." And just like freaked the shit out of us all. But he's in there now, dear Brother John. But that must have had some kind of influence, that excursion, because years later I was judging the Adelaide Hills Wine Show, and there were 6 judges and 4 of us had all gone to school together. So it was me, David Lemire, Sean Smith, Matt Pick, who's now at Seppeltsfield, and Tara Sakota. So, so 4 of the 6 judges had all been through that school excursion experience. So there was obviously some resonance there.
Yes, for the dark side, obviously. A dry wine excursion and then a crypt.
Yeah, turned us all into, sparked the interest and turned us all into booze hounds.
And tell me about when you're working at the cellars, and talking about that back office. Were you tasting wines? What was that kind of experience of getting into that like?
I still remember quite clearly Jeffrey telling me, he said, "Oh, you work for me, and if you want to make, wine a career," and at the time I didn't, but he said, "If you want to make wine a career, you'll get a job anywhere in Sydney because you've worked here." And I thought that meant that, I was going to get this amazing training. What it really meant was Jeffrey was notoriously the biggest asshole in the Sydney wine trade, and anyone who thought if you could last there, you could work anywhere. Like the number of people I saw getting sacked while I worked with Jeffrey, he often would hire English backpackers who, I remember him telling one guy, he was showing him around the shop one morning, showing him how it all worked on his first day at work. And Jeffrey just turned to him and said, "You have the worst effing breath I've ever smelt in my life. If you don't make an appointment for the dentist, I'll make it for you." Guy just looks there sort of shattered and stunned, and half an hour later he goes to take his lunch break and we never see him again. So Jeffrey was notorious, and there'll be a lot of people, if there are people of older generations who listen to podcasts who will remember Jeffrey. In fact, the Pinot Trophy at the Sydney Royal Wine Show is the Jeffrey Crundle trophy for best Pinot, and I was working for him around the time that he first decided to sponsor that. And it's remarkable to think that, in the space of my career in wine, so we're talking about 94, 95 here, when he, there wasn't a trophy for the best Pinot at the show for a start. He then sponsors it. The first 2 years he sponsored it, they didn't award a trophy for the best Pinot, and he was getting really frustrated because all he wanted to do was floor stack the crap out of it in the shop and say, "Hey, everyone, look at my Jeffrey Crundle trophy winning Pinot Noir." So he was getting really frustrated that they wouldn't award the trophy. So within the first year that they did award the trophy, they awarded it to a wine from Cellar Masters that he couldn't sell anyway. So I think he was even more frustrated. But
no wonder he's a cranky guy.
Yeah, but he did. I learned to taste. He would do a thing like every second Thursday afternoon or something out the back. So this shop was an old warehouse in Brom Street, just back off Victoria Street and the Cross. It's that first street, runs parallel to Victoria Street, first street sort of heading down the hill. And it was an old warehouse and, pretty basic place. And he would just like floor stack boxes of wine, and it was really no frills retailing. And he'd have a table of samples out the back, and there were a couple of old veterans of the Sydney wine trade, sort of old distributors and reps. It was, I think Frank Zvardaveen and Ian Hunt were old mates of Jeffrey's, and they would come and I'd be allowed to taste with them, and they would just taste through a bunch of samples looking for anything good. And I just sort of was never asked what I thought, really. Occasionally Frank or Ian would have a look and say, what do you think? But that was sort of when I first started thinking about, that sort of critical tasting process, when you're not just pouring it and trying to get it down your gullet, but you're actually trying to assess what's in the glass. And then from there, I went to work for Ian Cook at Five Ways, and that's when everything changed for me. That's when it became kind of serious, because Cookie took that to a whole another level, and every day would open something and shove it under your nose and go, all right, what's that? Talk to me about that. So that's when I really started. That's when the floor, gave way under my feet, and I dropped into this wine world that I've never really wanted to escape since.
Nicely said. Tell me, what was some of the teachings that you most remember from Ian Cook? Like, if you were to take away a couple of things, which I'm sure you took more than that, but what are the main things that you really are thankful for?
Thankful for a lot of things from Cookie. One, exposure to great Italian wine. I mean, that was Ian's real passion with the wines of Italy. So, I from there, from a very low base, suddenly built an understanding and love of great Italian wines. But Cookie was always about just, think clearly, think deeply about what's in your glass, and just always look for quality, and whatever those, parameters are, and they will change from wine to wine. But, is that wine you're looking at, a great example of that variety, that region, that style? And I think a lot of that was, the shop's tiny. It hasn't changed since 1995 when I was there. He rang me a couple of years ago, I think, to say he had ripped up the carpet and he was putting new carpet in, which, as far as I know, is about the only work that's been done on the place since. So there was a lot of broken bottles that I was responsible for in that old carpet. But the great thing about that then was it really did require all of us to be very selective in what came into the shop. So every wine that was on a shelf had beaten 10, 15 other wines to get that spot on the shelf. We couldn't buy everything because we just didn't have space for it. So, you had to be really critical in your assessments, and you have to go, well, is this, if we're going to have a $25, Riesling, in this spot in the fridge, well, it's got to be the best $25 Riesling we can find. If we've got only space for, a couple of things from Côte Rôtie, well, it's got to be the best Côte Rôtie we can find. So I think that was really useful. And you know what? And it was, I started to see that if you took it seriously, you worked hard at it, people would, doors sort of opened up to you. I remember going to sort of tastings. Like, Jeffrey would never send me off to a tasting, but Ian did. And I would go to tastings and have a little name badge on it. It would say, Nick Ryan, Five Way Cellars. And no one knew who the hell Nick Ryan was, but they knew what Five Way Cellars was. So that meant that the people would, when they're standing there pouring the other side of the table, they'd take the time to talk to you about what they were pouring for you, or something might come out from underneath the table that because you were from Five Way Cellars, and you get to see that. So it just, it really did just show me that work hard at it, do it well, and you earn some respect, and things really do open up for you.
I think that, a lot of people don't appreciate the importance of independent retailers and just those neighbourhood institutions, and it's sad because you're seeing them disappear, and there's a BWS on every corner, and it's hard for them to stay in business. But man, they really can have an impression on the towns and the suburbs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? I probably think the happiest I've ever been in wine was sort of working in that shop. I loved that, daily interaction with people. And we, we're a small shop in Paddington, tight little community. And we'd taste wines out the back. We'd have a winemaker with us or a rep who was showing us new releases, and we'd taste the wine and we'd go, oh, who's going to love that? Bob Jones is going to love that. So the next time Bob Jones comes into the shop, goes to buy, what he's been buying recently, we go, no, you're not having that. You're having this tonight because we tasted this, we bought this because it's right, in your wheelhouse. And, that was, I used to love doing that. And then, we had some great customers who were, had great sellers. And often we would, be in at work and there'd be someone who'd come in and go, look, here's this, here's this 1972 Grand Echezot, I opened last night with dinner and, saved a little bit for you guys to try. And that, that sort of stuff was, it's wine university, it's like the MBA of on-the-job wine studies. We really got to see some really great stuff from some really knowledgeable people. And it's also how I started getting into the writing thing as well, because Cookie had a newsletter that used to get letter dropped around Paddington and mailed out to a mailing list. This is how old I am and how old school this is, that we would write up as a bunch of Word documents, save to a floppy disk and take to a printing business in Bondi Junction to be printed out, 10, 12 pages, and then we would mail it out and letterbox a regular newsletter. And I started writing that for Ian. And then there were a few guys, around Paddington, regular customers who were media types, some journalists and newspaper editors and things. And a couple of them were sort of coming in and saying, who's writing this stuff? And I sort of tentatively put my hand up and said, oh, it's me. And they went, well, it's actually pretty good. That sort of gave me the confidence that maybe there might be something in this. And I always, like at the shop, we always thought it was important to follow who was significant in a wine writing community. And I would open the shop on a Saturday morning, and my first half an hour of a Saturday morning would be sit down and have my coffee. Back in those days, I was occasionally smoking a cigarette too, so I'd sit on a milk crate, smoke a durry, drink my coffee out the front of the shop, grab the papers, grab the Australian and the Sydney Morning Herald, look at what Hewan had written up in the Herald, look at what Halliday had written up in the Australian, and then if we had those wines in stock, go out and get them, stack them at the front of the shop, because we knew people would be coming in to buy those wines based on a good Hewan review or a good Halliday review. So that was always the routine of the first part of a Saturday morning, was to be ready for the people that would come in with the paper in hand. And then especially on days, on the sort of once a year when there was like a Halliday top 100 or, Hewan would write something on his wines of the year, we'd know we'd get people coming in with the paper in hand wanting to buy those wines. So started to think maybe there was something in this wine writing caper after all.
Tell me about how did you go about finding your own writing voice?
Look, it's important to do that. And I think it's just got to come out of you. And I think you've just got to be honest enough with yourself that you can do it, and confident enough that it's worth coming out. There's nothing more boring than trying to see, a facsimile of someone else's style, but under a different name. And so I think you've just got to be a little bit bold, and every now and then you'll misstep, and you'll look back on something and go, Jesus, why did I say that? But you've got to stumble in those directions to find the right path. I think you'll eventually get there, and I think that's why often when you're starting out as a writer of any kind, but say writing about wine, when there are very few opportunities to really get your voice out there, and often you do a lot of someone says, could you write a website for me, or can you do some copywriting for me? And then we've all done that sort of starting out. And I found that stuff really hard, trying to write in someone else's tone and voice, and become less and less interested in anything like that, and thinking, look, it's just, this is me, this is what my voice, and I think I just have to be true to that. I think you taper it a little bit for publications. I'm going to write slightly differently for the World of Fine Wine to the way I'm going to write for Country Style magazine. And that's just, you've got to always be aware of your audience, and you hope that you've got the capacity to, to cover off all those different perspectives. But at its essence, it still has to be your voice that's coming through.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about missteps, or was there any hiccups along the way that you can think of specifically where you thought, yep, I've learnt from that, I'm not going to do that again? Yeah, look, there's still stuff that happens more recently than you would hope. And a recent column for the World of Fine Wine, I actually just talked about matching crushes when I actually meant matching presses, and it was just here's a little tip for young players. Do as I say, not as I do, and don't always leave yourself right up to that last minute and writing in a mad rush before deadline, because it really does help to go back over everything you've written, polish it, check it, refine it. And I still, having been doing this for 20-odd years, I still don't do that enough. I am a terrible procrastinator. I am someone that needs to feel the hot breath of a deadline on my neck to really get stuff going. So, I probably should give myself false deadlines, just so I do give myself some time just to go back over those sorts of things, and not let little brain farts like that get through. But I think that would be my one big bit of advice. Well, it is really good advice, and it's amazing how when you think you read something, you proof it, and it looks great, and then you come back and you go, what jumble is that, when you've got a fresh set of eyes and you've given yourself a moment. So I can completely understand. So from somebody that's a procrastinator and then kind of didn't show up for class, you've been self-employed for decades now.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
It is, and I'm impressed. Run me through a great day in the life of Nick Ryan, like a stellar day in your work life. What does that look like?
Look, the thing that, when I first started doing this, and the thing that really, I always thought, I feared that I'd be that guy that, gets up and still in a bathrobe at 2:00 in the afternoon, and, that sort of bad working habits. But when I first started doing it, my partner at the time was having to get up and go to work every morning, and my life wasn't worth living if I was still in bed when she was leaving the house to go to work. She was supporting this bizarre idea that I had that I was just going to be a freelance wine writer, but that meant get up, get off your ass, get started by the time I'm leaving the house. Otherwise, I will, you'll be miserable for the rest of the week. So at least I just got into the habit then of just getting up, starting the day, making a coffee, sitting at the desk. I might spend an hour looking at, reading music reviews on Pitchfork or, looking at Twitter or that kind of thing. But I'm at least there, I'm dressed, I'm sort of ready to start a day. And a good day is a day where it flows. You can feel the electrical storm in the head that's making it all happen. And I think you'd like that day to be every day, but it's not. And I think sometimes you have to accept the days when it's not happening. And on those days, you either get up and walk away from it, or you just try and plod through. You just get something done. You try and advance, try and progress. And it won't be the best writing you do that week, but it's still something. You've progressed, and then you can go back and you can, when it's working better, you can polish it up again. But so a good day is a day that I'll taste a bit. I'll find some really inspiring wines, and I'll bash out 1,000 decent words, and and that feeling at the end of that day is great, and it is kind of why I do this. I explain to people it's a bit like having homework every day for the rest of your life. And there are teachers of mine at school that would just laugh heartily in my face to think that I made a living now on having to hit deadlines. So I think that's that feeling, though, when you send something off that you're happy with, and then you can sort of get up from the desk and go pour yourself a drink and just feel really sort of satisfied that you've done some good work. I think that's why we do it. I mean, that's the nourishment you need from what can be a fairly painful process sometimes.
Definitely. When you're stuck in your own head too, sometimes it can be torturous.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all tend to work in isolation. I'm here 15 minutes out of Clare between two sort of little hilly ranges of, and surrounded by paddocks, and I can stay here for a week without really going into town, and that can be kind of isolating and dangerous sometimes as well. So I think you need to be kind to yourself. You need to be ready to make hay when the intellectual sun is shining, and you also need to know that there are times when it's not going to work, and that's okay as well. Don't beat yourself up for that.
I want to get stuck into some nitty gritty, because you're always somebody that's never kind of shied away from maybe some of the harder conversations, I think. So, and I'm going to, try to extract everything I possibly can, bleed you dry during this next few moments.
For what it's worth.
How do you juggle professional relationships and then an honest opinion when it kind of comes to wine reviews?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question. And, some of my best friends in the world are people whose, wines I look at professionally as well. Like I said, I just spent last week with Joe Holliman. I just went down there for a couple of days helping out in the winery. Joe's one of my nearest and dearest friends and has been for a long time. And I don't think you can necessarily disassociate yourself from that, but I think you can actually then use that as well. And that, I don't push his wine for, say I've got one spot to write about a Pinot. If there's a Pinot I like more than Joe's, I that gets that spot. But if I am writing about Joe's, I think I can understand it in a different way. That sort of, when you know the people behind the wine, I think you can see those people in the wine. And it's the nature of wine writing in a small market sort of like Australia, is that we all do see each other, a lot. And I think the reason I'm writing about wine for a living is I like wine people. I think there's something about people who dedicate their lives to this pursuit that I connect with and that I respond to. So I'm always going to have good friends in the wine industry, and then that's if I was to try and say, well, I can't write about wines that my friends make, I would be missing a whole bunch of really interesting wines. And it's not necessarily about me, it's about who ends up reading it. And, I think, the readers probably need to know about these wines as much as anyone else. So you don't unnecessarily favour the wines made by people you're close to, but you certainly don't punish them for the misfortune of being your mate as well.
Yeah, it does sound like just being fair to all parties involved, really.
Well, yeah, and then when you'll taste blind. Often if I am looking at a bunch of wines, looking for something to fill a hole somewhere, you'll taste those blind, and then make your first run of assessments, and then you do that second run of assessments when you've revealed them as well. And hopefully they line up, but you tend to go with your blind assessments first. But then you think, well, if they do line up, then you go, okay, now I can write something quite insightful that probably no one else could write about this particular wine because of the insight into that person that I have.
I adore your writing for Australia Wine Business Magazine. It's just the sheer honesty, the humour, the commitment to cause. I'm in love. How do you take on criticism or judgment about your writing? How do you, because it's arguably, it's always going to come your way, and how do you develop that kind of second skin?
You get big enough, old enough, fat enough, hairy enough to not really care, and you kind of say that, like, everyone cares. Like, you can't, you put a lot of time and effort into it. A lot of the time it's putting your heart and soul on the page. If someone says, well, that's shit, well, that's always going to hurt. But you just kind of go, look, you can't write for everyone. And if you are writing for everyone, then you're not writing well. You're just, the middle path is the most boring view. So I think, take the praise when it comes, but don't let that get to you. Take the criticism when it comes, and don't let that get to you either. You're going to get both. Enjoy the praise, wear the criticism. Those people that praise you are geniuses. Those people that criticise you are fuckwits. So don't worry about it too much. And really, unless if you've made a fundamental error in something, I think absolutely that should be pointed out, and you've got to address that and own it. But if someone just doesn't like your opinion on something, well, that's fine. They're allowed to, but by the same token, you're entitled to that opinion. So, like I said, the worst thing you can possibly do is not get any kind of response. I'd rather have criticism. I write a column for the Sunday Mail paper in Adelaide. It's not a wine column. It's a whatever pops into my head kind of column. Like last week, I wrote about how I hate the fact that everyone in this country decides when they're half cut at the pub they need to sing Daryl Braithwaite's Horses. Shits me to tears, okay? And yeah, you're never supposed to read the comments, but yeah, I always read the comments, and there's people going, yeah, we agree, and then there's other people going, well, you're an idiot. That song's amazing. Let people do what they want to do, and you kind of go, yep, that's a valid opinion as well. But I think like wine writing also. So the stuff I write for the Australian. The Australian probably has the most feral online commentary of just about any publication in the country. So it's funny, you write wine stuff in there, and I always find it fascinating. You write wine stuff for general media publications, and people are always fascinated and wanting to put the boot into what they think is sort of overly florid wine writing and the art of, descriptors. And, there's some guy that would always comment on stuff I'd written for the Australian saying, it's just wine. What's all this, ironstone and Dutch licorice and fennel seed and cassis and, it's just wine. And I wrote a column back one day to say, I get paid by the word. If I just said, here's the 2018 Hill of Grace, it's just wine, I'll get $4 for that column. I can't live on that. I've got to come up with a greater insight into that wine just to feed my kids. So I just think that's always kind of hilarious that these grumpy old Statler and Waldorf sort of types sitting there banging away on their computers, commenting on every story online in the Australian, but then they having profess all their political views through the opinion pages, they then come and find my wine column at the back of the paper and decide they're going to put the boot into that as well. So I would rather that though than nothing. I think if you can engage, if you can evoke a reaction, whether it's a good or bad one, it's better to do that than to just be boring.
I definitely agree with you on that, but it does remind me a little bit of some of the people that call in on like AM radio and give their opinions, and you just kind of think, what have you added to the world by coming in and calling up about that,
Well, exactly. No, exactly. Well, it's like every year the paper will want a review of the current release Grange, and you can guarantee there'll be someone who'll comment about, I remember buying, this wine back in the 60s when it was $5 a bottle, and this is outrageous, and, Penfolds have lost it. And you go, yeah, sure, that prices go up. You can argue about the price of it as much as you like. That's not really, that's the least interesting part about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Tell me a little bit about how you feel about scoring wines, the 100-point system, pros and cons in your mind.
I don't do it. I've never actually published points in print. And I'm kind of, that's a philosophical thing for me, and I get it, and look, I do a lot of show judging, so and even when I'm tasting at home, I'm sort of making those points in my head so I can distinguish between the things that I'm tasting, but I don't necessarily publish them because I there's a bunch of things. I think if I give it 96 points and you give it 92 points, who's right? Who's wrong? And those numbers put the idea in people's heads that one of those is, one of us is right, one of us is, hasn't quite got it. And I just don't think that doesn't make sense to me. That's not how tasting wine works for me. And if I can't give you an insight into the wine through my words, then why am I doing the job? If you're just needing numbers for me at the end of the paragraph to really understand the wine, then I'm not doing my job properly. And my job is to, through the use of words, give you an understanding of what to expect when you taste that wine. Well, at least what I saw when I tasted that wine, and maybe to that is at least a framework for you to have when you go and, if you're thinking about buying that wine yourself. So I think there's, and by using points, and I have no problem with the people that do, and I absolutely understand why they do and the process, and how for a lot of people that's important. But I always say there's two kinds of wine writers too. There's writers who choose wine as their subject, and then there are tasters who want to share that expertise with readers. And I think I am, I think I'm a pretty good taster, but there are better tasters. I've done a lot of wine show judging, but there are better judges. But I think I'm a writer with wine as my subject. So I think I place greater value on the words, but I think numbers give people an easy out. And I don't want, I hate the idea of spending all this time crafting really nice sentences, knowing that someone's probably just going to skim all over that and go to the number at the end and use that as their key sort of decision on whether the wine's any good or not. So that sort of worries me. And then, then there's all those other conversations that are being had around the world at the moment about points creep and it's an issue. Better than I do that it's an issue. I probably don't have the profile that some other people do because there's no retailer out there using my points in all their marketing material. But so be it. I'm comfortable with that. But again, each to their own. I absolutely support everyone who goes through the rigor of applying points to the wines they're tasting, and I know that everyone that does it with real rigor. So I absolutely respect that, but it's just not for me.
Yeah, and I think so many interesting points that you've brought up. I mean, for it's systematic and it's there for a reason, but there's always going to be holes and things that don't make sense. And I agree with you. I think part of the job of writing about wine is to try and decipher what's in the bottle so that people have a bit more of an awareness of what to expect, or perhaps just a bit more insight. And sometimes it is a shame because people only see numbers rather than really how the effort you've, like you said, put in to try and share the excitement of whatever's in the bottle. And it might be 99 points for someone and 80 for somebody else, and that's the whole thing about grape juice.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's it. Put 10, the 10 or 12 is whatever it is in this country at the moment, or making a living or trying to make a living about writing about wine. Give us the same wine. Tell us to put a point on it. No one. You're not going to get the same number from everyone. So the wine isn't different. The tasters are different. So what's the number really mean?
Very good points. I love it. Nick, what are you most proud of in your career so far?
That I'm still doing it, I guess. Look, that I've got to tell some really nice stories and shine light on some people doing really good things, and that to me is again, maybe going back to the thing about numbers. I think my strength and my role in this weird world is to try and tell some stories about people doing good things in wine. Ultimately, I love what's in the bottle, but I'm probably even more interested in how it got there. And I think there are such great stories out there. So I'm always really proud to have maybe given someone who hadn't previously been exposed a little exposure. I wrote a thing for the Halliday Mag the other day about these semi-professional winemakers at Clare. Like my kid's headmaster at school, who does 12 hours a day every day at the school, but still manages to work 30 acres of vineyard and crush nearly 50 tonne of fruit for a wine label that he sells in school holidays. And then he wouldn't normally get any kind of coverage like that. But I had that conversation with him one day in the schoolyard, and he was talking about how much he was doing. I mean, that's kind of significant. So I like that. You can uncover sort of those stories. And there's a couple of winemakers I know that the first press coverage they ever got was something that I had written, and that opened up all sorts of doors. Look, I know, talking about Taras, again, I remember, and going back to talking about writing about your mates as well, I remember writing up one of the early releases of Fugazi for a Wines to Watch column that I was writing for the Wine magazine at the time. And that magazine, a guy called Ronnie Sanders, who's a distributor in the US, he had a subscription to the Wine Mag because he had a few Australian agencies. Read that, went, I've got to find out who this guy is, who names a wine after a Washington DC post-punk band. I love that band. This guy's got to be interesting. So he chased Taras up, and was Taras's, and still is, Amber's agent in the US. And they've done great things in the US. A Coat of Barrels has been a real hit there, and I'm certainly not saying that I'm responsible for that, but Taras and Amber are responsible for that. But just that little that moment where someone sees something I've written, chases that up, something happens for those guys of real significance to their winemaking journey. I mean, I'm proud of that. And
you certainly do that, that's for sure. And forge some pretty special relationships because of it. And I think that's a major factor with you, is that you have really great relationships with so many people.
I try.
You do, and that's something I agree.
Oh, there's one winemaker I won't name who threatened to try and punch me out last year, but that's a whole other story.
Well, I can't wait to hear that. You'll have to tell me a little bit more in person about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you in person. No, I'm big enough and ugly enough to look after myself. Beer. You need beer. Like and shitty beer. I know this. I'm not alone in this. I just when I'm tasting, when you're thinking about wine and flavour so much, sometimes you just need the white noise. Sometimes you just need to switch off, and shitty beer is the way I switch off. So, cold, brown, bubbly, almost flavourless. Miller High Life is the benchmark for me. And my dear friend Chuck Hayward in San Francisco has the greatest welcome to San Francisco of anyone. Next time you're there, you hook you up with Chuck. You go to the Belterry's favourite bar, and you have like enormous pints of margarita and tiny little beers, little Miller High Life beers, and it's the perfect way to get off the plane. I think you're flying to San Francisco usually about 2:00 in the afternoon. You go straight there, meet Chuck there. It is. I haven't been able to do it for a few years, and I miss it. So I'm going to try and put that on the agenda very, very soon. To drink margarita and Miller High Life with Chuck Hayward in San Francisco very soon. Barolo, that's probably a pretty predictable answer, but I think for me, fragrance, the seduction of fragrance, but the satisfaction of structure that Barolo delivers, that's what I love. And I like tannin, and I like acid, and Barolo can deliver that by the shovel load. So, well, that's probably the bad terminology because it's not shoveled in there. It's naturally occurring. But I just find those wines really satisfying intellectually, physically, sensorially. I really dig them. And Fernet.
I thought you might say Fernet actually, but I wasn't. I wonder if it's going to be in the top 3 or if it just depends on his mood.
No. I do. I love it. It's it just helps redefine everything at the end of an evening. Often, there's often regrets at the bottom of a glass of Fernet, but that's fine. The regrets I'm happy to wrestle with.
It's that dark side that we keep talking about, resurfacing.
Well, that's it. That's it. Embrace the dark side, Shanteh. Embrace the dark side.
Oh, I love that. And actually, I've had some nice moments with Chuck myself. I remember drinking a bottle of Verdelho that he was absolutely frothing over in the Hunter after a long day of judging, and he said, "Let's get a bottle of Verdelho," and I was thinking, oh God, I just need to go to bed.
Only that fucking weirdo would be frothing over a bottle of Verdelho.
It was such a funny moment. Oh, bless him.
Maybe it was one of Jim Chatto's, because I always called Jim, and Jim hates it when I do it. But the one year I judged in the Hunter show, and Jim was always pretty successful at the show, but this one year the only trophy he got was for the best Verdelho. So at every opportunity, I've often in print or in public behind a microphone called Jim Chatto Australia's Verdelho King, and he hates it.
Bless. I love it. I can just see his face. Oh, so good. Nick, it's never a dull conversation with you. Thank you so much for making time.
My pleasure.
And thanks so much for everything, and cheers to you.
Cheers, mate.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.